It's no secret that the DJI MAVIC Air 2 is a fantastic drone. It's got a fabulous camera on it, brilliant image stabilization, and a whole swag of very clever features. But I've been particularly interested in how it performs as a landscape photography camera. And so I find myself taking it out more and more often when I go out to shoot stills images. And yes, the video that you can get from the MAVIC Air 2 is awesome, and it's cool to create those kind of videos. But what I really like is the idea that you can have kind of the world's highest tripod, the world's tallest tripod, and get way up above the landscape and see it from a different perspective. Plus, you can scout around the area and see things that you just wouldn't be able to see as easily if you had to walk to them. So I've enjoyed taking stills images with my MAVIC Air 2, and I kind of wondered just how well does it compare to the R5. Now, of course, the EOS R5 is a brilliant camera. It's got a full frame sensor. It's got huge gobs of dynamic range. It's got, 45 megapixels to play with, and they're full-size megapixels. Whereas the MAVIC Air 2 has got natively really 12 megapixels. It's got a half-inch sensor, and it can simulate 48 megapixels with some clever electronic trickery. But just how good is it as a landscape camera, especially at sunset when dynamic range is tested and contrast and all this sort of stuff? So I took both of them out to a spot that I photographed a few times in the past, and I put them as best I could side by side to see how they would perform. Here's how it went. You join me today at one of my favourite little locations. It's this little pond here, this little dam on a farm property about 20 minutes north of my house. And today I'm hoping to answer a question that I had before I bought my MAVIC Air 2, and that is it good enough for landscape photography? Now, I've already taken a few landscape shots with my MAVIC Air 2, and I've been pretty pleased with the results. But I thought one good way to test it is to actually take some photos with the MAVIC Air 2 and then take photos of the same location with my Canon R5. Now, I expect the R5 is going to perform a whole lot better in terms of resolution and dynamic range and sharpness and all that sort of stuff. But the one thing the R5 doesn't give me is elevation. And I think of the MAVIC Air 2, or any drone really, as the ultimate tripod, allowing you to get up to 120 metres above the ground, legally, higher, illegally, to capture compositions that you just otherwise couldn't get unless you climbed a very tall tree or an adjacent mountain. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to launch the MAVIC Air 2 right here, take a few shots here, and then take the same shots with my R5. So let's see how they perform. All right, you can leave now. Off you go. Unfortunately though, the light has just dipped below a cloud, which is really unfortunate. But we'll see what happens. So I guess this is going to be a self-portrait. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a photo now using the light that we have at the moment. We'll switch over to photography. I'll zoom down a bit. Make sure I've got it on photo, 48 megapixels. Now it's set to auto exposure. There we go. I tend to shoot mainly just an auto. I'm sure I'm going to get a little bit more manual with my images with the MAVIC Air 2 as time goes by. You just heard me fire off a shot there. I'm going to do the same with the R5. 2-second timer as always. Okay, that's that. Now the framing of course is going to be quite different because the MAVIC Air 2 is up nice and high, whereas of course my R5 is down on the ground. Okay, let's try and emulate with the MAVIC Air 2 the kind of perspective I'm getting with the R5. So let's bring it right down low, bring it closer to the scene. Now of course this won't be ideal. It won't be the same height as the R5. I can bring it down lower, I guess. Switch back to photo, 48 megapixels. I'll zoom the camera down a bit so it exposes a bit better. Okay, so that's what the drone's seeing. Let's go back up higher again. Let's take another photo. All right.
Landing.
All right. One great thing about shooting landscapes, well, there's a lot of great things about shooting landscapes with something like the MAVIC Air 2, but one of them is just how incredibly stable it is. I mean, it's sitting up there in a breeze right now and it's flapping around like this, and yet it's rock solid. If I show you the video now, you can see that it is absolutely dead still. So even though it's getting tossed around by the wind, that little gimbal and all that fancy software in the MAVIC Air 2 is making the image look like it's planted on a heavy tripod. It's just amazing. So in terms of you know, exposure time and that sort of stuff, and being able to support the camera on the MAVIC Air 2 when you're taking a photo in this kind of light, you know, it's certainly stable. You're not going to get the kind of results that you'll get, you know, shooting on a tripod, you know, for 20 or 30 seconds, of course, because you just can't do that with this. But given that it has a fixed aperture, I think it's f2.8, given that it's got a fixed aperture, which is fairly wide, it does let in a fair bit of light. It is, of course, a fairly small sensor, so it cannot compete with the larger sensors with a full frame sensor, but it still does a pretty good job, especially with this 48 megapixel setting, which I know is not a true 48 megapixels, but it still does a pretty bloody good job. And of course, you can clean up your images in Lightroom, you can get rid of noise, you can sharpen them up a little bit if you need to, that kind of stuff. So it gives you quite a bit of latitude. Yeah, okay, so that's about it. I think I'm going to land it now. Unfortunately, this wasn't the ideal conditions for testing the, well, we don't know yet. I mean, once I edit this, maybe it is perfect. Maybe these conditions are perfect for this, but...
Battery level is low.
Okay.
Will go to the home point in 10 seconds.
All right, so battery's running low, so it's going to land itself now. One of the other cool features of this little drone is if the battery starts to run low, it'll just fly back home and land itself.
Landing.
Like a good little boy. So down it comes. I feel like giving it a little pat on the head and saying, "Aren't you a good boy?" I'll be interested to know what you think of these results. Slap a comment down below, and if you enjoyed this video, give it the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, I'd love it if you would. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.